Too often, I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. Again, barefaced lies. Too often, I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. Again.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you really wanna where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced lies.
Barefaced lies. Barefaced lies.
Hey Sean, you got a party, you got that little party going on there. Keep to the left, you can't think right, so everything you do goes wrong, yeah. Incompetence just leads to disaster. Corruption brings it on even faster. What you say?
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you really wanna where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you really wanna where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced lies.
Barefaced lies.
Comrades, you always told us you'd build us all a new Jerusalem, yeah. You talk the talk, but when you walk, you only leave a crooked line there. And you don't see the trouble that's brewing, if all you do is just what you're doing.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you really wanna where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced lies.
Is this where you wanna be? Debts and childhood poverty. Will somebody set us free from this corrupt kleptocracy? Oh yeah.
Barefaced lies.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you really wanna where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you really wanna where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you really wanna where it's all gonna end?
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011 he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
A very, very good evening. Sunday, the 9th of March 2025. My name is Miah MBE. This is a Recusant 9 transmission. We've had a very politically chaotic week, I think, locally and nationally. So I am not going to waste your time delving into that. There's nothing I can add on any of that. I think that will take us anywhere. And some of it has happened, and that's the end of it. And some of it is yet to play out. And there are people of far more significance than myself who are commenting on it. So I'll leave that to those. What I promised last time I was on to someone who was heavily promoting this petition for a public inquiry was that I would spend some time going through the process and trying to educate all of you of where we're up to and where we're going with some of this. So that is the focus of this evening's broadcast. I want to talk about how we fight the government and how the government will respond. So I've put together a presentation which I think you will find of value. Some stragglers coming along. David Gidman, Gary, Dennis. And I'm fine, thank you. For those of you who asked, I ask you all to like, I ask all of you to share. Some of you contact me afterwards and say, oh Raja, you do this too much, you do that too much, you ask for support too often. Well, if the numbers were where we needed the numbers to be, I wouldn't ask. The YouTube channel, as you can see, I think it's somewhere around 11,000 subscribers, and that's completely free. So it's been stuck at around 11,000 now for a month or so. So I'm not sure what anyone expects me to do with that apart from ask for support. The Facebook page is a disgraceful 7,000, I think 6,900, and it has been stuck for years. And remember, we started on Facebook over 5 years ago. So there's nothing I can do about that. I put a call out today asking for people to sign up to it, and about 100 people, 200 people liked it. 200 people liked my calling out for saying please follow the page. And then I clicked to see how many of those 200 people or so followed the page, and most of them didn't follow the page. So I'm not sure what we are going to do with any of that, really. And well, I can, mate. I've been at this long enough and I can work out why it's not. So, and signing the petition, I'm sorry, you just need to hold your horses and let me explain. And of course sign the petition, but it's not as easy as sign the petition. So I'll get to that, please. It'd be my Ramadan is fine. I was at my sister's just earlier. I was there yesterday. I struggle with the caffeine, if anything. The food doesn't bother me because I don't eat a lot. It's in the main the caffeine that gives me headaches. So, before we get into the presentation for this evening and this evening's transmission, the contents of it, please like, please share, please do comment. It makes a difference to the algorithms. There's 169 of you here, and maybe a dozen of you have commented, so that says its own story. If I if I sound a bit frustrated, a bit down, I've been doing this for a long time now, and I feel like we've been on the crest of a wave, and that wave's now gone, and we're pretty back to where we were, and maybe it is Ramadan and I'm just not feeling the energy, but I'm not feeling the energy at all. We're desperately trying to increase our subscriptions on Redwall and Rabble. Remember, it is 100% free to sign up. I only ask people who can afford to do so to pay. We're not doing well there either. Our numbers went up for a bit because I was incessantly pushing, and then people came back and said, oh, you're pushing too much, and our numbers are just stalled again. Over the weekend, I think we've had, less than five sign-ups over the weekend. So, hey-o. If it's not of value to you, you just need to say, and I'll move on to do this work in a different way. I know you are, Julie. I know. But what do you say? What do we say, Julie? So, if you do find value, redwallandrabble.co.uk. That's the best way to support me. It gives me an idea of how many people are with me on this journey and are supporting me, because it's an active action. You sign up, you type in your email address, and it means I know if you can bother to type in your email address, it means you're invested. It costs you nothing. And our total subscribers on Redwall and the Rabble, and this includes friends, family, and probably 100 or 200 people with fake accounts from various government agencies. Our total number after all these years is 2,797. So I reckon after all said and done, 2,500 people. It's no way near enough to get a campaign to where it needs to be. So that's where we're at. But Redwall and the Rabble is the best way, and if you are already subscribed and can afford to do so, then I am always grateful for people who buy me a coffee. We've got some breathing space. There was someone who got in touch with me over the week. In fact, didn't get in touch. They transferred some money to me, so it was a substantial amount of money that I didn't even know where it came from, if I'm honest with you. So very, very grateful to you. And it means the shortfall and all the rest of it, we're okay. We're okay for a bit longer financially, but this isn't about the finances. It's about numbers. If we're going to win this, the only way we'll win this is with numbers, because that's how you scare a government, and that's how you force the change. Numbers and sustained interaction, sustained campaigning over a prolonged period of time. Which brings me to the petition. People have been crying out for a petition. I'm not one of them, by the way, because I wouldn't have done it now. And it's been out for a week or so, I think, this petition. The deadline is the 4th of September, but the deadline doesn't really matter. And the idea is to get to 10,000, which means the government responds, and to get to 100,000, where it'll be considered for debate in Parliament. Not will be debated, considered for debate in Parliament. And that's why I'm sympathetic of petitions when they are part of a coordinated campaign. But when they're out on their own, what tends to happen is 15,759 have signed it so far, 100,000 will sign it, and then those people will end up frustrated because it's not part of a coordinated campaign. I get people get excited, I get people wanting to make a difference, and I have no issue with Richard Hilton. I have no idea who he is, and this is the petition he's put up, and I'll read it all to you. A task force has helped arrest hundreds of offenders since 2023. We believe abuse is large-scale and ongoing. Yet we think the authorities refuse to acknowledge the background and motivation of abusers, the failures of police, social workers and local councillors, and potential cover-ups. I mean, it doesn't even make sense. What's the connection between the first sentence and the second sentence? And I don't mean to be dismissive. It just doesn't even make sense to me. A task force has helped arrest hundreds of offenders since 2023. Full stop. So what? What does that sentence mean? Please explain it to me. Those of you who've been saying, sign the petition, explain it to me. We believe abuse is large scale and ongoing. So is that what it means? It's still happening? Is that what the first two sentences meant to say? Yet we think the authorities refuse to acknowledge the background and motivation of abusers, the failures of police, social workers and local councillors and potential cover-ups. I've read it and I read it and I read it, and it doesn't make sense to me. I get the title, Launch a Public Inquiry into Grooming Gangs. Then it goes and expands. In August 2014, a groundbreaking report by former senior social worker Alexis J revealed that an estimated 1,400 children had been sexually exploited in Rotherham from 1997 to 2013. And the majority of known perpetrators were of Pakistani heritage. It revealed the failures of leadership and staff, fears of being considered racist in identifying the ethnic origin of perpetrators. We think only a full public inquiry can force overdue change. What does it even mean? Tell me. There's 113 watching with me right live, 231. Educate me. You've all been pushing this, so educate me. What's the petition about? Okay. It's too late now. I'm sorry, and if you haven't pushed it, I apologise, and I'm sure there are plenty of you who haven't. It's a sentiment I was expressing. There's a petition, sign it. Well, so far, a measly 15,760 people have signed it. It would have made more sense. Sorry, I'm trying to cover it up. It would have made more sense if all it's had was this. Launch a public inquiry into grooming gangs. But no, it's badly worded, badly phrased. So, 15,760 have signed it so far. The target is 100,000. So the government will respond. The government response will be a paragraph to say we've received a petition. And at 100,000 signatories, this petition will be considered for debate in Parliament. And to get to 100,000, they've got until the 4th of September 2025. So 6 months. Here is the petition that was successful, that was landmark on some of this. It was to do with the Home Office's report into grooming gangs. Sajid Javid, I think, commissioned it, they had it and they hid it. And then when they finally released it, it was a cover-up. Complete cover-up, where it lied around the statistics. It manipulated the statistics to represent something that to hide the nature of the Pakistani grooming gang. So that's what the government did. It was a Conservative government, by the way, that did that under Suella Braverman. And the power to release it was Suella Braverman's power, and she didn't do. The government is refusing to release official research on the characteristics of grooming gangs, claiming it is not in the public interest. That was a Conservative government. So we're clear. The government is refusing to release official research on the characteristics of grooming gangs, claiming it is not in the public interest. We, the British public, demand the release of the official research on grooming gangs undertaken by the government in full. It has been revealed earlier this year that an almost 19,000 suspected child sexual exploitation victims were identified by local authorities in just 1 year. Sajid Javid promised a review as Home Office Secretary in July 2018, pledging that there would be no no-go areas of inquiry. Quote, "I will not let cultural or political sensitivities get in the way of understanding the problem and doing something about it," he said at the time. So this was very specific, very clear. This is a well-worded petition. We, the British public, demand the release of the official research on grooming gangs undertaken by the government in full, and it provides the context. It got to 131,626 signatures, and it was debated in Parliament. Do you see how many people are in Parliament debating this? Do you see? Can you count them? Maybe a dozen? Listen to it.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this House has considered e-petitions 300239 and 327566 relating to grooming gangs. I'd like to thank the 131,625 people who signed the first of the petitions which we'll be debating today, which was calling for the release of the Home Office review into it, which of course has now happened, and the second smaller petition signed by over 30,000 people calling for a public inquiry into the issue of grooming gangs. I mean, clearly this issue is of huge importance and has caused immense distress to a huge number of people across the country. The victims themselves who have been victims of these appalling crime, but also their friends and family as well. And I'd add to that, whole communities, I think, have been shocked and appalled by what has happened. I think there is a sense, though, from this Home Office report that it isn't quite what many people were intending. When I talk about many people, I ahead of this debate, being a member of a petitions committee, I do not represent a constituency where this has been a big issue. But I felt it incumbent upon myself to speak to other right honourable members who have knowledge in this area, but also to some of the victims of this appalling crime as well, to gain a greater understanding as to what their views are and also their views on the report. Many of them do feel that the report doesn't go far enough. They believe it only touches upon the issues, and if it is a start of something far more significant, then okay, but if it's the end of it, then they feel very unsatisfied. I would support them in saying that I do believe further action should be taken. One of the key problems here has been the lack of data relating to which has made it difficult to really go into detail regarding the characteristics of the grooming gangs and those involved. And I think that has been problematic. I mean, some honourable members have raised the point that if the data is not available, then surely you can just look at those who have been convicted and you can gain a pretty accurate picture there of the kinds of individuals who have been engaged in the matter. So that has been something which has been raised before. But many of the victims I've spoken to, I mean, of course, those who are most responsible for this appalling crime are those who have been found guilty for it, those who carried out the evil act. Those are the principal individuals. But there is also a great sense from many of the communities. I mean, we're talking about the Rotherham and Rochdale and these towns, and the brilliant work that the Honourable Member for Rotherham has done on this issue, showing great courage and standing up for and battling for her constituents. But also many of them feel that they've been failed over a long period of time by the state, both at a local level but also at a national level. They feel like this is an issue that was swept under the carpet because it was seen as being inconvenient and not politically correct to talk about it. That is how they feel. That is how they feel, and that is the hurt that they feel. And I think it should be incumbent upon all of us in this House to address those concerns and give them a sense that justice has been done, and also that the lessons have been learned, so that we can try and ensure that we do not continue to have these appalling crimes happening within our society. I think there is a wider point here, though, about this issue and about whether it was political correctness, for want of a better word, or something else, or concern about cultural sensitivities, and the fact that it does seem, in many cases, that the majority of those who've engaged in this evil act did seem to come from one particular community, and they feel, and I agree with them, that if it is the case that certain crimes are disproportionately committed by members from certain communities, then we should be open and honest about that and address it. Because actually, by sweeping it under the carpet and not addressing it, it actually makes tensions and divisions worse down the line. And I would say that as a society, we've got a long way to go when it comes to tackling racism, but I don't think we've completed that journey yet. But wouldn't it be great if as a society we were mature enough that we could have these difficult discussions, whilst at the same time never losing sight of the fact that the vast majority of people in our society stand against racism and also stigmatising particular communities. But at the same time, this does need to be addressed. Madam Deputy Speaker, we look at the role of racism and how many of the victims of this appalling crime feel as though it is the concern from certain individuals that they would be branded a racist or called out for being a racist if they spoke the truths that they know them to be on some of these matters. But actually, a lot of these victims, who more often than not are white, working class girls, our girls, their view is that they were, on occasion, specifically targeted because of the fact that they were white, because of their Westernness, and because of the fact that they weren't Asian. And that is how they feel. So if you disagree with how they feel, then I would encourage you to have a discussion with them, because that is how they feel. And therefore, the information and the data about the ethnic background of those who have been found guilty of these crimes is necessary if we are to gain a profound understanding of this appalling crime, learn the lessons and ensure that it never happens again. And if we do believe that this kind of racism towards white girls is a driver here, if we do believe that that is the case and it's an aggravating factor, then we need to address it, and we need a report that addresses it and gets under the skin of the issue in a way that it hasn't so far. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I plan not to talk at great length here today, because I do, as a member of this place, feel passionately about this issue. As it happens, my constituency hasn't been impacted by it as much as many honourable and right honourable friends' constituencies have. So I want to make sure that they have as much time possible today to talk about some of the stories within their own constituencies, because I think that is very important. But I would like to thank the founder of the petition, George MacDonald, and also the victims that I spoke to as well. I think it's very right to say that the abuse of young girls that we've seen conducted by grooming gangs has been something which is shaking society, and it's something that we should do everything within our power to eradicate. I would like to say thank you on behalf of the petitioners for, I believe, has been the actions of my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, who I think has been very robust on this issue, like her predecessor as Home Secretary. the Right Honourable Member for Bromsgrove. And I think I do feel that if it hadn't have been for my Right Honourable friend, the Home Secretary, there probably wouldn't have been any report at all. Because at the end of the day, a report is better than no report, and a report that at least promises that in future we will get the right data to be able to look at this issue and come up with solutions. So, in terms of, as a member of the Petitions Committee, I support the petitioners in their desire for further action to be taken for this to be looked at more thoroughly. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Q. The question is, as on the order paper, I hope that everyone who has indicated that they wish.
We're going to play that through because I think it's important, because I need you to understand what happens. You got the member of the Petitions Committee, a Conservative, standing up in a barely, more or less empty chamber, maybe a dozen people in there, I think. And he talked so much, he failed to say the word Pakistani a single time. He failed to say the word Muslim a single time. He made reference to racism and working class white girls. He was happy to talk about it, say working class white girls. And the one time he used the word Asian was to quote the victims. That's how much pussyfooting he did around that. And he claimed a report is better than no report. And actually, no, it wasn't. Because the report they published was an attempt to cover it up. This was in 2021. The report Suella Braverman's Home Office published, with Suella Braverman writing the introduction to the report. Let's be clear, she wrote the introduction to the report. She put her name to that report. Was nothing other than a cover-up. Listen to the first person, maybe.
Speak this afternoon will have the opportunity to do so, and therefore I'm introducing an immediate time limit of 4 minutes on backbench speeches as we go to Oldham East, to Debbie Abrams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, tackling violence and sexual exploitation has been one of my priorities since I was first elected in 2011, when, during my roundtables with constituents, I was first made aware of child sexual exploitation concerns following the Rochdale grooming gang scandal. It's not an easy subject to discuss. I just find it incredibly difficult to even think about someone who is knowingly abusing a child for their own pleasure. But we know it happens in every community and in every part of the country. And we all have an obligation to do what we can to prevent it and root it out wherever we find it. I have a clear protocol to immediately escalating any CSE cases that are brought to me with the appropriate authorities. And unfortunately, my team and I have dealt with a number of cases. Greater Manchester Police provide me with regular briefings on activities undertaken by Operation Messenger and now Project Phoenix, who specifically deal with CSE across Greater Manchester. I meet regularly with local groups such as Keep Our Girls Safe and the Women's Child Project, which stands for Care, Help and Inspire, but it has a wider remit that support girls and women experiencing abuse, as does Inspire Women. And pre-pandemic, when I was doing at least one school a week visit, I used this as a platform to promote equality, self-awareness and resilience of all children, whatever their background, sex, ethnicity or religion. I also meet regularly with Oldham's Interfaith Forum, and together we have worked to promote human rights for all, including the rights of our children. In Parliament, I'm a member of the CSE cross-party group chaired by my honourable friend, the member for Rotherham, who I congratulate for all she's done to expose CSE there. We have heard from those who have been abused and reviewed evidence of good practice, amongst other things. But as the member for Ipswich has just mentioned, I'm keenly aware that understanding the scale and extent of CSE, and in particular CSE associated with grooming gangs, is unknown. As the library report has identified, it only becomes known once the cases are identified and victims and offenders are reported. And it's estimated that only 3 out of every 4 victims of rape or assault of someone under 16 don't come forward and report it to the police. In a recent Home Office report, about 10,500 cases were flagged as potentially CSE related. The victims of CSE were said to be mainly young women, predominantly 14 to 15 years old, who had a number of risk factors that made them vulnerable for exploitation. Group-based CSE offenders were said to tend to be male and under 30, younger than those offenders acting alone, who were said to be more prolific. Clearly, these data are inadequate, and the focus of the Home Office on this important issue needs to sharpen up. Every child matters, and their rights as enshrined in the UN Convention to the Convention to which the UK became a signatory in 1990 need to be actively embodied. However, I will not let those far-right groups, wherever they may skulk, get away with lying and trying to sow hate, division and blame on this issue. I repeat, child abuse occurs in every community, in every part of the country, in every part of the world, and I'm committed to root it out wherever it may be.
Jackie Doyle-Price. Thank you, Madam Deputy.
Debbie Abrahams, one of Oldham's MPs, Oldham East and Saddleworth, also known as Oldham East and Kashmir. You've said it. You called her a liar. You don't need me. But you saw what she did. She twisted it straight away and talked about the far right. Twisted it straight away and talked about the far right groups. Twisting it. Debbie Abrahams, for those of you who are new to me, was the first person to have me dragged into the police station. She falsified evidence, attempting to make it out as though I had committed a crime. 4 hours later, I was escorted out of the police station by a very sheepish looking now inspector of Greater Manchester Police, because he'd believed the MP without checking her evidence. Because if he'd checked her evidence, you'd have seen she had doctored her evidence. There are children in secondary schools in Debbie Abrams' constituency that are dragged into cars from school gates and taken away to be gang raped. Count Hill School is one of them. It's now gone, but Count Hill School. And then it moved on, from my understanding, to the other school that replaced it. But as by the by, frontline staff from Count Hill School told me that they were going and picking up girls from houses when they hadn't come into school. And in those houses were Asian men, and they filled in the forms. Asian men, Pakistani men. Let's be specific. They filled in forms and nothing happened. And with this debate, absolutely nothing happened. And with the petition that 130,000 and more signed, the outcome was this. A very, very small number of the 130,000 continued to campaign. Because having invested time and effort, they were played, they were manipulated, and the report that came out was doctored. And no government minister challenged it. No opposition minister challenged it and dissected it line by line. We did at the time. But you know, who am I? I had an audience of what, 100, 200 in a small town. And I went through it line by line and demonstrated why it was fabricated, why it was manipulative. So a small number continued. A more significant number disengaged in democracy this way. What's the point of signing a petition if this is what they're going to do? And then another significant number actually lurched more to the right and the extreme right, which is what I believe these people want to happen. So you're exactly where they want you to be. So they can describe you exactly as they want to describe you. And they can ignore your legitimate grievance, which is the gang rape of children. So that's what took place. And it doesn't matter, it was COVID and a few people phoned in. You know, very few people phoned in. What's she called? Sarah championed and did a statement. You want to listen to it? Here.
And it's not to be expected. Thank you.
Comes on after this.
We now go to Sarah Champion.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I really appreciate that we're having this debate because I've spent 8 years trying to get justice for survivors of child sexual exploitation, CSE, and to prevent grooming gangs. I've been vilified, I've been smeared, I've been threatened, and that's by the far right and the far left, who use this crime for their own political agenda. The only impact it's had on me is I get a taste of the intimidation that survivors have to endure. So their threats just make me more determined to make sure we permanently get rid of any form of child sexual exploitation. But their actions embolden the abusers, and they make it more difficult for those in child protection to do their jobs, and they deter victims from coming forwards. I fail to understand why this topic is so emotive. Where there is a clear picture of gangs with a similar profile involved in sexual abuse and exploitation, this should be investigated without fear or favour, as any other gang-related crime would be. We live in a democracy. The law should be able to be applied in an even-handed way. I want to turn to Rotherham. We're very fortunate because we have the National Crime Agency carrying out Operation Stovewood. It's looking at cases of CSE by grooming gangs between 1997 and 2013, so just a 16-year period. But already they've identified 1,569 survivors, 261 designated suspects, and to date we have had 20 convictions at court and 4 await trial. This is in 16 years. I know survivors who are 70 years old. Think about the scale and the length of time of this abuse. Now some specific suggestions to prevent CSE by grooming gangs and secure convictions. Each potential victim should have a named person who they are comfortable with, and this should be shared across all stakeholders. Treatment of witnesses and survivors must be constantly reviewed to make sure that they are able to give evidence in a safe format and receive the support they deserve. Mandatory relationship education for all primary school children should have been in place in September 2020, but we've still not been given a date of implementation. The law desperately needs updating on positions of trust and on online harm. There should be stricter sentencing. The use of pre-charge bail, particularly where there is a flight risk, must be swiftly brought back. Serious consideration needs to be given to offender release. Sexual predators don't change their patterns of behaviour, and they return to the same communities where they carried out the abuse. Prevention must be our focus. That means that health professionals should be trained to spot and support potential perpetrators. Trading standards officers should be able to investigate premises where they believe grooming gangs operate. The multi-agency approach is key, but this has to be full and equal across all partners. And that should also include government departments. I'm glad the government are looking to make funding for support services more stable. To succeed, it has to be long-term funding. Unregulated care homes must be banned for all children under the age of 18. We need to promote closer interaction between the police and CPS. We need to use disruption tactics as much as possible, which avoids victims having to give evidence. Our adversarial court proceedings further brutalise victims and survivors. This is unacceptable and we have to change it. We need to establish a national set of triggers which allow local authorities to provide support for children showing signs of harm rather than the current postcode lottery. We need to make sure that every toolkit dealing with CSE understands that children have a range of cultural or ethnic backgrounds. Currently, there is an assumption that victims of CSE are non-disabled white girls, and that is not true. We need to require every local authority to take urgent steps to improve the accessibility of CSE services to children.
Order! The Honourable Lady has well passed her 4-minute time limit, I'm afraid. I'll give her her final sentence.
Fundamentally, the government needs to work in a cross-departmental way to end this crime once and for all.
Thank you. Chris Clarkson.
Sarah Champion talks about how she was targeted for raising this. Yeah? So the fact that if you raise this, you're targeted is a matter of fact. Because she was targeted. But even she's been brought into line, and I question how genuine she is. I genuinely do. Thank you. And thank you, Robert. Thank you, Rianne. I spoke to Rianne earlier on this week. I sent her some work. She is chasing me up. So my apologies, Rianne, for the delay in getting it to you. And you're just one of many people who are asking me for help, and I'm trying. I'm trying to keep up with all of it. And Robert, I spoke to not long ago. She can't bring the term Pakistani either. But she does make reference to how long it has gone on, and she makes reference to a 70-year-old woman. So you're talking of a 50-year plus, half a century, that this pattern has existed in Rotherham. And she numbers the number of victims in something called Operation Stovewood. And I've not been able to find any up-to-date data on Operation Stovewood. And when I can't find up-to-date data, it usually means it's not good. There's nothing I can do about that, I'm afraid, my brother. I'm not, yeah. I'm not that guy, am I? So we know, what am I trying to say to you? We know on its own, a petition is no good to anyone. And that was a very well worded petition. Because this is 2021 and all the things they're talking about, nothing was done. Because we're now in 2025. And Yvette Cooper has set Baroness Casey off on a 3-month rapid audit. Well, that was 2021. Asking for data. Asking essentially for, and if we want to try our best with this petition, if you want me to try our best with this petition that's currently out, what it's essentially asking for is twofold. One is a public inquiry into grooming gangs, but the public inquiry wants to do something specific. It wants to identify the racial correlation, the religious correlation, whatever identity characteristic you want to use. Is there a racial or religious correlation? Now, I'm already there. I know there is. And I've evidenced there is, and people have evidenced there is. Now, they'll hide it, and what Baroness Casey will do is hide the correlation by widening the remit. What I would have done was held off on the petition until after Baroness Casey's 3 months were up. And those 3 months are up April. Early April. And what I would have done is submitted a Freedom of Information request to the Home Secretary asking for the terms of reference of the Casey review. So what exactly has she been tasked to do? Who's on her team? What sort of resources has she got? All of that. And that's one of the reasons, mate. One of the reasons. I'm boring. I'm systematic. I'm formulaic. And I go about things in a certain way. Because the outcome I seek, I do so having an understanding and appreciation of how government operates. So, please do sign the petition. But understand that on its own, it's not going to do anything. And even with a whole host of other actions around it, without the politicians in Parliament working together strategically to counter this, promote this as a task force, as an opposition task force, we're not going to get anywhere until the election comes along. And that's, well, this time last week I was saying reform, and now I'm still saying reform. But it's not been a good few days for him, has it? Thank you very, very much, Paula. I've just seen your name has flashed up. You're the first person who signed up to me as a paid subscriber today, Paula. So thank you. I appreciate it. It makes a massive difference. I know it's only a couple of quid, and you signed up for more than the £3 option. So thank you for that. You didn't have to, but thank you for that. But it makes a massive difference to me. The work I do is only possible. I don't even know what that means, mate. Okay. Thank you, Doug. Let me get on with what I want to talk about. To counter the government, you need to know what the government are going to do. And there's something called the anatomy of a government cover-up that I've pulled together from looking at past scandals to the grooming gangs. Government cover-ups follow a predictable pattern. The goal is always the same. I'll do it this way, I think. So you can see me as well. The goal is always the same. Suppress the truth, protect those in power, and avoid accountability. That's what a government cover-up looks like. You suppress the truth, you protect those in power, and you avoid accountability, no matter the cost. History, as time after time after time, has shown us that when a national scandal threatens the government's authority, officials follow a 7-step strategy. I'm going to show you this 7-step strategy now. It says, banging his, I've got a screen in front of me. And just when I've set to give it a whack to bring it back up. First, they deny. Then they suppress. Discredit. Whitewash. Scapegoat. Delay. And lastly, they just move on. They just move on. So I'll give you an example for each of them. Been at this for 6 years, mate. And actually I don't see a united effort, if I'm honest with you. I don't see a united effort at all. I see politicians who jump on the bandwagon when it suits them. And I see media channels that hop on and hop off depending on what their mood is. Let's look at deny. Let me give you an example. The Windrush scandal. Remember it? It exposed how the UK government wrongfully detained, deported and denied legal rights to thousands of Caribbean immigrants who had lived in the UK for decades. First of all, the government denied deporting legal residents. They claimed the cases were isolated mistakes. When the evidence mounted, officials dismissed concerns as exaggeration. Victims were blamed for not having the right paperwork. I remember watching it on the news myself. Victims were blamed for not having the right paperwork. And this was despite records being deliberately destroyed. Statistics were manipulated to make the issue seem small, and whistleblowers were ignored, with officials insisting there was no systematic problem. People had lived in this country all their lives who were as British as you or I, were deported and died on foreign shores. Denial, denial, denial. There's a correlation, isn't there, to the grooming gangs. Police and councils initially denied the abuse was happening, despite reports from social workers. Those raising concerns were branded racist or accused of spreading far-right conspiracy theories. Victims were gaslighted and dismissed as unreliable or complicit in their own abuse. Lifestyle choices, remember? Crime data was manipulated to downplay the connection between perpetrators. That's what the Home Office report did. And the issue was framed as a small problem. Now we know this small problem, nationwide, systemic, I think even is described in Parliament. And Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister, made reference to it as well. 100,000 children, if not more. So that's the denial. And I'll use the Windrush scandal as one. They suppressed the evidence. I'm a Liverpool fan. The Hillsborough disaster. In 1989, 97 Liverpool fans were unlawfully killed due to overcrowding at the stadium. Police immediately blamed the victims, falsely accusing fans of causing the crush. Evidence later revealed police negligence, but officers altered reports to remove responsibility. The government and media participated in a decades-long cover-up, delaying justice. After 27 years, an inquest finally ruled the deaths were unlawful. But prosecutions against those responsible failed. They suppressed the evidence. Official reports were altered. Key documents were classified or destroyed. Survivors were harassed and threatened into silence. The media helped spread false narratives, and legal barriers were placed to delay access to critical evidence. The parallel with the grooming gangs, confidential reports on grooming gangs were suppressed for years. Released documents were heavily redacted, removing key details about the perpetrators. The one in Oldham wouldn't even put a number to the number of victims. Police destroyed case files. The minutes of the meeting, remember, in Manchester, have gone missing. The minutes of the meeting were they decided to close an investigation into 97 known rape gang members. Social workers who spoke out were silenced, forced out of their jobs, or threatened. And the media avoided serious coverage until public pressure forced them to report it, and as soon as the pressure goes, they go back to how they were. When the truth becomes undeniable, so when denial no longer works, authorities work to hide, destroy, and manipulate the evidence. They suppress it. And the next one, you discredit. Who do you discredit? You discredit two groups. You discredit the whistleblowers and you discredit the victims. I'll give you an example. Remember this man? Dr. David Kelly went for a walk into the forest or the woods, never to, and died. Apparently he killed himself. Dr. David Kelly was a weapons expert who exposed government lies about Saddam Hussein's supposed weapons of mass destruction. That's who he was. Weapons of mass destruction was used to justify the Iraq war. After being named as a source, he was aggressively questioned and later found dead under suspicious circumstances. Officially ruled a suicide. The government denied pressuring him, but many believed he was silenced. The subsequent Chilcot inquiry revealed the Iraq war was based on false intelligence, but no senior official ever faced prosecution. Kelly exposed false government claims, and he was publicly humiliated. His personal information was leaked. Who do you think leaked it? And he was found dead under suspicious circumstances, and the government never faced any consequences. Parallel with the grooming gangs, social workers who reported the abuse were accused of racism. We who whistleblew were accused of being far-right activists. Survivors were portrayed as unreliable, damaged, and their past used against them. Lifestyle choices. Journalists covering the issue are smeared as far-right agitators. Campaigners were arrested or silenced for reporting on trials or just campaigning for a public inquiry. And as much as I don't like her, you've got to acknowledge it. MPs like Sarah Champion were forced out of their roles after speaking out. Discrediting the truth tellers is essential to keeping the cover-up intact. So you suppress and you discredit the whistleblowers and the victims. You then whitewash it. How do you whitewash it? It's a controlled inquiry or a whitewash investigation. A controlled inquiry or a whitewashing investigation. So when public pressure forces an investigation, the government ensures it avoids real accountability. And to continue with Dr. David Kelly, of course, the one is the Chilcot inquiry, which was the inquiry into the war in Iraq. It took 7 years to publish its findings. The report confirmed that Tony Blair misled Parliament. What does misled mean? Lied. Confirmed that Tony Blair misled Parliament, that the war was unnecessary, and that intelligence was manipulated to justify invasion. That's what the inquiry found. However, it stopped short of calling it illegal, and no senior figures were held accountable. The government's goal was clear: delay the truth until public outrage faded. 7 years delaying justice. And after that, it avoided direct blame. The report was heavily redacted, removing key details. And even though it admitted failures, it stopped short of declaring criminal intent, and not one person faced criminal prosecution, despite the lies that led to war and the killings of what? 1 million people? Is there a parallel with the grooming gangs? Of course there is. Multiple inquiries were delayed for years to avoid immediate political fallout. Just look at what's going on now. Why is Yvette Cooper refusing a public inquiry? The Home Office refused to publish reports. This isn't just a Labour thing. Under Suella Braverman, why do you think that petition needed 130,000 signatures? It's because the Conservatives refused to publish the report as well. Investigations were narrowly focused, or tell me something new, avoiding deeper issues like police corruption or the direct involvement of politicians. And the narrative shifted to blaming institutional failures rather than deliberate cover-ups. What on earth is an institutional failure? The Oldham Assurance Review. There was no cover-up. There was no cover-up. When line after line in that report was clear evidence of a cover-up. And of course, no senior figures have faced legal action. Despite the evidence, government inquiries are often designed to fail. That's what you need to take. They're designed to fail, acting as a stalling tactic rather than a real attempt at justice. So that's what a controlled inquiry or whitewash looks like. And if we get past that, and I think we are past that on this journey of ours, there's limited admissions and scapegoating. So when overwhelming evidence forces an admission, minor figures take the blame while the real perpetrators walk free. Example, the post office scandal. Between 1999 and 2015, hundreds of innocent post office employees were wrongly convicted of theft due to a faulty IT system called Horizon. Despite knowing the system was flawed, the post office covered up the evidence, leading to ruined lives, prison sentences, and suicides. The government later admitted the scandal, but prosecutions were overturned decades too late, and key decision makers avoided justice. Indeed. The post office blamed individual managers rather than the faulty IT system. A handful of prosecutions were overturned, but thousands of real ruined lives were ignored. Executives escaped accountability despite knowingly prosecuting innocent people. And the government introduced weak reforms, claiming the problem was historic. The parallel? Of course you can see it. Historic. The scandal is being framed as a past issue. Historic child abuse, despite ongoing cases. Social workers are held to account. Junior police officers might be blamed, but no senior official will be touched. They remain untouchable. The police officers identified in Rochdale walked free. a few more perpetrators may be jailed, and they'll make a massive thing of it, and they are. Oh, we've identified 200. Was it Sarah Champion saying? 247? We know just off the scale of the number of girls that the perpetrators are at least as many, if not more. If you look at the sequence of how these offences took place, there's the groomers, there's the one who gang raped them and trafficked them, and there's all the customers. None of the customers get done, even though we know those customers are in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands. Politicians, you can see it, can't you? Carefully worded apologies, pretending they're on our side. And we know new safeguarding measures, lessons will be learned. The government will admit just enough to ease public anger, but protect the system from real consequences and protect themselves. I think that is where we're up to. The limited admission and scapegoating. So in this 7-stage sequence of cover-ups, that's where we're up to. Hand in hand with that, of course, is the delay and fatigue strategy. The longer a scandal drags on, the easier it is to bury it. And sorry, the obvious one, irrespective of your politics, is the bloody Sunday inquiry. Before I was born, January the 30th, 1972, British soldiers shot 26 unarmed civilians during a peaceful protest in Northern Ireland, killing 14. The government immediately justified the killings, claiming soldiers were fired upon first. False statements were fed to the media and victims were portrayed as terrorists. It took 38 years. 38 years for an official apology, and even then only a few soldiers were investigated while the government avoided wider accountability. Blame the soldiers. Put them in a position where they should never have been in the first place, under circumstances they should never have been under. We're not there yet with the grooming gangs, but this will happen if they get away with it. Legal cases will be delayed for years, ensuring fewer convictions. New reports will be released when media attention is low, and authorities will refuse to reopen investigations. The longer they stall, the less the public cares, and they will be protected. And if they succeed with that, the last one is they quietly move on. Policy change without accountability. Small changes, but avoid holding powerful figures accountable. They'll introduce new policies without admitting past failures. No legal consequences for those who enabled the cover-up. They'll rewrite history, so McMahon and his friends will pretend they were on the side all the time, just like Debbie Abrahams did in that speech. They'll destroy the remaining evidence, and they'll declare the issue resolved. That is the 7-step strategy. And the grooming gang scandal, the rape gang scandal, has followed the exact same pattern as past government cover-ups. Each stage has played out in a predictable way, from denial and suppression to scapegoating and slow deflection. You have to understand this playbook if you want to make sure history does not repeat itself. Because this cover-up isn't over yet, and for the first time ever in this environment, they are facing a politically organised opposition. And we are few. We are few in number. And what I talk about is boring. I get that. But this is how we win. Equipped with the knowledge, the skills and understanding of what they will do, rather than be outraged at what they do. We know what moves they are going to make. And it's how do we counter those moves. And that's why I'm here. And that's what I've been doing for as long as I've been doing it, which is why we've got to where we are. This scandal would never have got to this point. And I accept I'm not most people's cup of tea or beverage of choice. But I'm all that you have in helping us get to where we need to be. So please, if you find value in my work, for the love of God, sign up to the webpage, Red Wall and the Rabble. It is of 1,000,000 times more value than signing a petition. Because I will educate you, I will empower you, and I won't abandon you. I will work alongside you, no matter how difficult it gets, in getting us to the end of this journey where justice is delivered and those responsible are held to account. And if I come across frustrated, thank you so much. It's because many of you are new to me. And as my friend Gary reminded me last week or the week before when I saw him, I took so many people locally on a journey. And now I need to do it again on a national level. And for me to do that, and I'm willing to do that, which is why I keep pushing my content, I need to grow my numbers. We've doubled our subscribers on Red Wall and the Rabble to 2,750. That's nonsense. You don't go from working on a town where you've got 1,250 people who are subscribing to 2,500 or whatever it now is, and you're working nationally. You don't. You've got to support me, or you'll just rant and rave and you'll get absolutely nowhere. And it does look like sometimes we're not getting nowhere, but we are. Because I understand their playbook and we've got moves of our own to make. And it would be hell of a lot easier if the people we have put our faith in weren't arguing with each other. But that, as they say, is a story for another day. I've been on Lotus Eaters. I've sat next to Peter Whittle and educated him. You've heard Matt Godwin. None of them do what I do. None of them do what I do, the commentators. I'm something else. I'm a campaigner. Thank you. Thank you. It's happening everywhere where the demographics are the same. It's happening everywhere where the demographics are the same. As for the fake independence, Louise, I think it's increasingly looking likely that our work in Oldham is coming to an end, isn't it? Because there's no hope there that I'm becoming very less able to make a difference. I've tried to reach out to Jordan Peterson, got nothing back. I've reached out to all of them, Trigonometry, Peterson, all of them. I've been reaching out to him for years, Jack, so you understand. And I said, give me half an hour and I'll explain it to you in a certain way. You ask me whatever questions you want and you leave better educated. Your viewers will leave better educated. I cover my own expenses to get there and come back wherever it is. Please, if you find value, I'm looking at the screen. Buy me a coffee. Better skill. Subscribe to the website Redwall and the Rabble. We're running low on support. Maybe we plateaued and that's it. And 2,797, 2,800 people, of which I reckon 300 are our enemies anyway. 2,500 people is all it is. No, I won't do Rebel Media. I've spoken to her. In fact, I speak to Sammy Woodhouse, who does all of that. There are spaces I need to occupy first. Although it's easy to push you into a far right sort of space. But you've got to expect I've been at this for a long time and I know what I'm doing. There's a time when you speak to those people, but first of all, you've got to occupy the more mainstream spaces. I am. He keeps rearranging with me. I think he's moving studios or something. I was meant to be there last week and we rearranged for this Wednesday and he can't do this Wednesday. So I'm waiting for another day with him. I want to go on his show because I listen to him as well, which is why I'm looking forward to that. I just find he's the ex-singer, isn't he? I just find him really, his story really interesting. Sorry, I'm just bashing my screen. That's gone off. No signal. Power saving. What have I done? Never mind. It's done its job. I can't do any more in Oldham. I don't think Louise is where I've come to. No, we're not going to get anywhere like that, mate. I appreciate you trying to help. We're not going to get anywhere like that. We need numbers. I've got just under 3,000. This can't carry on like this. We'll try again. Maybe we end up trying something else. Take care.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011, he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.